Hello, my name is Ryan Craig, the owner of QC's Building Services, a residential building inspection company based in Brisbane that's been operating for around 20 years. I'm a licensed termite technician and a residential building consultant for low-rise completed building inspections. This video is designed to provide information about a really critical and key area for residential properties. Failure to address and acknowledge this area and have good procedures in place will result in significant material damage and costs incurred by property owners, and that is all about drainage. So the video will basically cover basic information and the types of drainage and some situations that can result in inadequate drainage and some proactive things to do to ensure you don't fall victim to having inadequate drainage and the costs associated to rectify. There's a few bits of legislation that are relevant for the area of drainage. The most important one is the Australian standard for stormwater drainage, which is AS 3500, and that was last reproduced and reprinted in 2015, so quite recent. The National Construction Code also has areas that dictates and demands that all surface water, rainwater, that kind of stuff, be directed away from a structure. It's not allowable or permissible to have it collected near a structure of its known consequences, and we'll cover that as the video goes on. The Australian Standard for Building Inspections, AS 4349.1, also states that any moisture or damp in unexpected or unintended locations must be categorised as a major defect. So that therefore elaborate or confirms and justifies the significance of this issue, where the standard classifies it as a major defect if it's found during an inspection. Unfortunately, during our inspections, we have to say that most properties we inspect have an inadequacy of drainage in place, and any moisture permeation into a structure is also categorised by the QBCC, that's the governing body for construction industry in Queensland, the Queensland Building Construction Commission, as being a Category 1 defect, a very serious defect, and again a major defect. So not only the Australian Standard for Building Inspections, but the QBCC, the governing body for contractors and construction in Queensland, also categorise moisture permeation as a major problem and defect, which is a result of having inadequate drainage mostly. All property owners, therefore, should, in our opinion, treat drainage considerations with the utmost respect and ensure at all times they have the best kind of drainage in place for their property. That should be continually monitored and maintained, i.e. the drainage system, and if there's any problems that are identified, they should be rectified. So that should be a regular thing that is carried out by property owners. Don't forget about it and assume all is well. Be proactive. Water is absolutely devastating to building materials. You think about, we need water to live and survive as a human, but what it does to metals, it will badly corrode it. What it does to timber, it will decay it. What it does to plasterboard, it will basically deteriorate it and make it useless. Electrical equipment, it'll completely devastate. Most building materials, water will devastate. So you want to keep water away, so your drainage has got to be absolutely tip-top to keep it out of a structure. The other couple of factors that is relevant for drainage is that the retention of any ground moisture against a structure can have an adverse effect on the footings, because it's generally reactive clay that we build properties on, residential construction in Brisbane. Some can be highly reactive clay, some can be extremely reactive clay, and if there's excessive moisture, that soil will swell and cause problems to the footings, and cracking and those kind of things can occur to a structure. The other aspect of retained ground moisture near a building is that it attracts subterranean termites, so you don't want to have excessive moisture retained around a structure through inadequate drainage, because it'll attract any foraging termites in the area. They're known to be attracted to retained ground moisture. A building inspection will not be able to provide a purchaser with any conclusive definition or position on whether or not a property has adequate drainage in place. Certainly, the only way to do this is monitoring during periods of rainfall to see if the drainage is effective. So you've got to have rainfall to see if the drainage is working. A building inspection, often if it's done without rainfall, which is most of the time, won't have that luxury and therefore cannot determine the effectiveness of any drainage that's in place. A building inspector should, however, be able to identify some inadequacies of any drainage that may be there at a property through their experiences, and they can do that by a lack of materials that might be present. They might identify that a drain should be present with sloping land contours, but it's not present, and that will allow for moisture to permeate into a certain area. They can also identify certain indicators of inadequacy of drainage, because materials can be affected, like efflorescence on masonry walls. It's a white salt that builds up where there's a build-up of moisture in higher exterior ground areas for masonry walls. Ponding water on paths, that's an indication of obviously inadequate drainage. Material deterioration, furrows in the soil of a subfloor indicates that there's excessive moisture coming through, causing the furrows in the soil. Paint peeling off the surface of materials. There's a number of things that can be identified, even if it's not raining during an inspection, to show that the property may have inadequate drainage in place. So it should be identified and picked up on, but ultimately the effectiveness of any drainage cannot be determined during a building inspection. Some common causes of drainage issues well, there's a number of them, but some of the common ones are downpipes that are not connected to drainage outlets, which is particularly common for older properties. Nowadays, for modern construction, all downpipes must be connected to a council drainage outlet, approved stormwater outlet, or stormwater pit within the block. Those are the two forms of approved drainage for downpipes. Older properties didn't have this regulation and stipulation, so consequently a lot of downpipes for older properties just go straight to the ground, and that can cause a lot of water to be collected against the structure. Any older properties that are subject to that and have downpipes going straight to the ground against the exterior of a perimeter, we would recommend that immediate provisions be made by the property owner or purchaser to upgrade so that they comply with the modern requirements, and drainage is connected to all stormwater drainage downpipes to stormwater outlets, council stormwater outlets, or into a pit and away from the structure because of the devastating it can have on structures, particularly slab on ground structures. There's also another cause of inadequate drainage can be deterioration in roofing materials, corrosion, leaks and gutters and downpipe joins, air conditioning units that have condenser pipes that drip for split systems particularly, poor landscaping insulation that has ground against the structure that is lower than any ground away, so that water will pond against the building. All ground should be graded away from a structure so the surface water is taken away. Pipes for rainwater tanks leaking, particularly the overflow when it's flowing out, they can often leak. Make sure they're all siliconed and watertight. Leaking pipes for hot water cylinders and overflows, valves. Contours of the land sloping towards the structure is also a cause of drainage issues, or the retention of retained ground moisture against the property. So if land contours slope towards the structure, you should have drainage and spoon drains and any type of drainage in place to divert the water away eventually. And one of the biggest aspects for inadequate drainage to occur is having higher exterior ground levels than the internal floor level. So if your internal floor level is any distance lower than the abutting ground outside against the structure that comes onto the building, it's going to be problematic for the potential of moisture permeation to come through inside the structure. Based on our experiences, it's always preferable to have the internal floor level lower than any outside ground level. Higher than any outside ground level, so that you don't have the risks of moisture, and no soil should be against the structure because that's going to increase the risks of permeation of water through the higher exterior ground. No known area for moisture permeation. We have high exterior ground, and it's extremely difficult to always maintain effective drainage because the materials put in place when it's initially done will deteriorate, and the higher the ground level on the exterior, the more difficult it'll be to rectify if there is drainage issues which occur, and costly as well. The other area that is more modern for retaining walls is the use of large boulder walls for big, large retention of ground areas, 2 meters, 1 meter plus, 3 meters. And these large boulders have big gaps between them where they meet, and it's impossible for effective drainage to be put in place behind these walls, and often the soil and drainage will permeate through these walls despite the fact that they're one of the more predominant and common retaining walls used now, just because they have obvious benefits of being not timber and they will go forever, but for drainage capacity, not good at all. So in summary, recognise the threat of having exterior ground levels higher than interior floor levels, and what risk that will bring with it for moisture permeation to occur at some stage of a property's existence. And the higher the ground level, the more difficult it will be for rectification if that occurs, and costly as well. It's almost impossible to maintain adequate drainage for these scenarios where there's higher exterior ground levels, and you must be aware of it and try your best at all times to be proactive and act immediately if you see any signs of moisture permeation occurring in these scenarios. Always ensure the best possible drainage is in place for a residential property. Be proactive with your drainage installation, and also act immediately where problems are identified in order to reduce retained ground moisture against a structure. For all forms of drainage, this involves for all forms of drainage, you've got to be proactive and good drainage installation and act immediately with your rectification. That's for subterranean drainage, which is beneath the surface of the soil. So that's when you have your higher exterior ground levels, all the drainage beneath that area against the structure. Surface water, which is where you have your water on top of the ground, that's got to be good at top knot, and roof water collection as well. So there's three main types where your drainage should be right on top of things and at the best possible optimum levels, so you divert water away from the structure. Where properties are bought that have non-compliance or known areas like downpipes not connected to stormwater outlets and go straight down to the exterior of a structure, people should always upgrade to make sure they comply and improve their drainage capacity because of the risks we've identified during this video. Don't be hesitant and don't be lax with treating this issue with most importance because of the devastating effect water and inadequate drainage can have on a property. Ensure that good inspections and maintenance is done at all times of the drainage, and repairs are done when they're identified or deemed to be necessary. Just remember that inadequate drainage can be completely devastating on most building materials used in a structure and extremely costly to rectify depending on the extent of the drainage permeation and the moisture permeation. So that's why you've got to treat this issue with really, really high priority and of utmost respect. I hope you found this video informative, and thank you very much for watching.